Rolling with the triple C, I'ma make him bend the knee. Rolling with the triple C, don't really count the heat.
So Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz ain't getting no buzz, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, who is it to blame? You know, I'm thinking about it right now with a guy like Nate Diaz. He's been branded through the UFC, and it's almost like you almost want to give credit where that's due. The UFC has done an amazing job of marketing their athletes. Now, without the UFC, I haven't seen any real headlines with Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. I really haven't, man, and I think that's a bit confusing to me. I didn't know they were actually gonna fight. I really didn't. I mean, I was here sitting down. My producer said, hey, oh yeah, we're forgetting about Nate Diaz, Jake Paul, and I think that kind of sucks. Why does it suck? Because man, these are two guys that were down each other's throat for about over a year now. That they wanted to fight each other. That this dude ain't gangster enough. That this dude is a clown. The fight is getting closer. We're literally about a week away, and nobody's really talking about it. It's either Jake Paul doesn't have the magnitude that I think the star power that we think he has, or Nate Diaz didn't do a good job actually promoting the actual fight. Because sometimes you think that no, you don't have to promote the fight. The fighters do. Like the fight that's happening, it is going to. But I just don't see that. I don't see that. But that being said, that's one. The fight's not being promoted. Two, who is it that's actually going to win? The actual breakdown of this fight. And I think having a guy like Nate Diaz, who has trained with guys like Andre Ward, who has sparred against real professional fighters for so long, like even Nate Diaz as a fighter, he's actually, his emphasis is based more on boxing, and if it ever goes to the ground, he's looking for submissions. You know, but will Nate Diaz pull it off? I 100% think he will pull it off. I think the only thing that he really needs to kind of watch out with Jake Paul is Jake Paul's right hand. He'll level change it too. He'll live on that. He'll live on that right hand. He'll go high low. He'll go high low, and then he'll eventually start coming across with that overhand. And I want to say Nate Diaz is smarter than that. And plus, the gloves and boxing are a little bit bigger. And there is one thing that I will say with Nate Diaz is that dude can take a damn hit. The dude could take a hit and still continue to keep moving forward in a 10-round fight against a triathlete, against a guy who boxes the whole time, against a guy who has boxed against professional boxers, against some of the greatest of all time and Andre Ward. My money is on Nate Diaz. I think Jake Paul does have hands. I think he is tough. But for a 10-rounder where Nate Diaz is going to be on you, we saw your last fight with Tommy Fumbles. I just think Nate is a different fighter. And Nate's always wanted to box. He's a big fan of the sport, so I'm going to have to give the edge to Nate Diaz.
Yeah, so what do you think is different about Nate Diaz than say Anderson Silva? Because we obviously saw a Jake Paul beat Anderson Silva. It was actually in Phoenix. You were a couple rows back sitting next to Kelvin Gastelum for that one. So what do you think's different, I guess, between Nate Diaz and Anderson Silva that gives Nate more of a chance?
I think is the fact that Nate Diaz's style, because remember, styles make fights. I think Anderson Silva was a guy who was super slick, liked to bob and weave, just moving things out, kind of popping and going. Like Nate Diaz is going to come. He's going to work the body just like his brother Nick. They love that left hook to the body, right hook to the body. He's going to come up top. Yeah, Nate Diaz's defense is probably going to suffer a little bit, but he will take a hit to give a hit. And I think that's what makes Diaz dangerous in this fight for a guy like Jake Paul.
And Jake Paul made an offer out there for Nate Diaz, $10 million after this boxing fight to fight in the PFL. Do you think that's something that Nate should seriously entertain, even though he's obviously someone who's fought for UFC for so many years? Do you think it's worth that $10 million payday to fight Jake Paul in the PFL?
Yeah, but it all depends. I think Nate Diaz has options. I think he has options whether he does the 10 mil for Nate Diaz or he does a 10 mil with Conor McGregor in the UFC. And probably even more. I mean, they'll probably give him 10 flat and then plus pay-per-view. if he's able to work it like that, which I'm pretty sure the UFC is willing and able to do something like that. If you, as you notice, like more and more fighters have been getting paid a lot more. So I think it's an option, but I do believe, like, say for whatever reason, Nate does lose to Jake Paul in boxing. I mean, the chances are of Nate beating him now in mixed martial arts are very slim, because Nate doesn't go for takedowns. He doesn't believe in wrestling. And Jake Paul would just keep it on his feet. And I know he's a former wrestler. I know both him and his brother wrestle in Ohio. And I think the fight with smaller gloves would probably be a little more difficult for Nate. But that being said, I do believe that Nate Diaz has options. You got the McGregor bouts, I'm sorry, and then you have, the Jake Paul route, where you can clearly make $10 million. And I just don't know if Nate, if he loses in boxing, let's say for whatever reason, will that hurt his, his persona, his character, his legacy, because then you're losing to a dude twice. It doesn't look good. We can always say the same thing with Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence. Like, Errol Spence goes up to 154 pounds and then loses again, which I believe he will, and I believe he will be stopped once again. Like, he might as well throw a fork on it.
That's interesting. So you think if Nate Diaz loses in boxing, then that MMA fight is going to be not just the
I would go for
the
McGregor.
easy fight.
I would go for McGregor. Yeah, I would go for McGregor, because it's going to come down to striking again. And Nate doesn't kick and he doesn't wrestle, so it's going to lead to this again. Like, simplify the fight a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't. Like, let's say if Nate does lose, I would look for that McGregor fight ASAP.